Hi, my name's Sue Muir. I'm a teacher of the deaf at SENDsuccess, and welcome to part 3 of My Understanding of Deafness course. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at part 1 and part 2. In this part we are going to be looking at mental health and supporting your well-being. Just before we start, it's really important to say that anybody can have a mental health issue at any time in their life, and I'm not suggesting that if you have a hearing impairment that you are less or more likely to suffer from mental health issues. I just think at a time where everybody's talking quite rightly openly about mental health, I just thought it would be a really important part to add to this presentation, and we just want to make sure that you know how to help your own well-being. And I think at this time when I'm recording this, we're in lockdown for COVID-19, and so I think more than ever it's important that we communicate. Communication is important at any time, but particularly now, and we're finding lots of new ways of doing that. So I felt like this was a really sort of apt time to discuss our mental health. I'm going to start this part of the presentation with a short video from the National Deaf Children's Society website, so thank you for letting me use it. I like using this video because I think it's a really sort of simple way of showing an issue that a hearing impaired person might come across every day of their life in different scenarios and different situations. It might be in a pub, a bar, a cafe, in the playground, in the canteen, at home, on a family meal, on holiday. It might, any time when there's sort of background noise, you might find yourself in this position. So I thought it'd be really nice to just show this very short clip, and then we can discuss it on the next slide.
Guys, check this out, right? Oh my god, you are not gonna believe this. You know how I was meant to be meeting Sophie after school last Friday, right? Well, I was meeting her on the bridge, yeah? And when I got there, guess what I saw? There was this group of 3 elderly ladies, right? They were naked. But there was 3 of them, all in massive hats. Who's rocking around the corner but Jeff's mum, holding an enormous... It looked like a massive fish, right? She totally kissed that monkey. Totally landed the plane. But the best part, the absolute best part of the whole thing, and I've never seen anything like this. Okay, check this out. See you, man. Oh, we better get as well.
What was that last bit again? What happened?
I'll tell you later, okay?
So just sort of thinking about that. So what happened? So it was clear to see that that young lady had a hearing impairment, and she's out with her friends somewhere noisy where there's lots of background noise. So that could be, you know, for them it was in a cafe, but that might be in the sports hall, it might be out in the playground, it might be a noisy classroom, it might be at home when you're having a meal and there's lots of people talking. And basically the young man that was describing the story was facing her at some point so she could hear him, and then at other points he turned away, and everybody's laughing and following the joke, and she's becoming more and more confused about what's happening. She's getting parts of the story, not all of it, so she couldn't really sort of join in. So I just wanted to think about how she might be feeling in that scenario, and maybe that's a scenario that you've been in yourself. So I think she might have been feeling a little bit isolated, a little bit left out. You know, are they talking about me? That's very easy for people to think that that's happening if everyone's laughing and you're not following. So the other people, you know, I don't think that they were very deaf aware. They certainly sort of weren't helping her or checking if she was following what was happening. And I sort of think the important thing here is that to think about is that if this were happening all the time, every time this young lady went out with her friends, that scenario was happening where she was finding it difficult to follow, and then at the end when she asked him, to repeat it, he just said, "Oh, don't worry about it, I'll tell you later." So that would have been a perfect opportunity for him to sort of go over it again, so she did know what was going on, but he didn't do that. And so I think that if something like that were to happen all the time, if you felt unable to talk to your friends and tell them that you find those scenarios difficult, you might end up deciding just not to bother going out, or maybe you don't bother going to meet those friends in the playground, or you might not bother trying to join in with the conversations. And eventually that can become very isolating. So as we're talking through this part of the presentation, again, we will be thinking about communication and the difference that that can make. And also just to think about, before we move on to the next slide, if that is a situation that you've experienced or something similar, where there's been lots of background noise, you've not been able to follow everything, what do you do in that scenario? Do you just kind of laugh along with everybody else, still not knowing what really is going on? Do you ask somebody afterwards to explain it? Do you ask them at the time? Do you change where you're seated? Or, how do you sort of deal with those scenarios? And is there a better way? Is there something different that you could be doing in that sort of situation? So sadly, when Hayley's not here with us at the moment, but Hayley is our audiological technician who most of you have met before, particularly if you're a hearing aid user. And Hayley is a hearing aid user herself, so she has got a profound hearing loss. So she relies very heavily on lip reading. And when we were writing this presentation, we asked Hayley to share some of her stories from school. So I've just sort of picked a couple to talk to you about. So the first one, she refers to it as the walk of shame. So she was a radio aid user when she was at school. Hayley's hearing was slightly better when she was at school. Her hearing has worsened as she's become an adult. But she used to have a teacher of the deaf who would visit her, and she was a radio aid user. And she said she used to feel embarrassed when she used to have to walk up and give the teacher the transmitter, and she sort of felt like everybody was looking at her. And I know that that's something that lots of students that I work with feel sometimes, and we've talked about different ways that you can get around that, how you can do that discreetly. And Hayley also used to say that when the teacher of the deaf used to come to collect her from class, which we don't do so much of now, but when she used to go out to have her sort of do some learning, she said she had windows all along the edge of her classroom so she could see her teacher of the deaf coming, and she had a male teacher of the deaf at that point, and she said all her friends used to sort of rib her and say, "Oh, like, here comes your boyfriend," and "or here comes your special teacher." And she said it was just really embarrassing sort of having to get up and leave the classroom. So I know that's something that some of you guys can relate to. Also, she talks about her letter to Santa. So she said when she was 13, she wrote a letter to Santa and she asked for all the usual stuff, whatever the trends were at that time. I know that she asked for a Madonna True Blue album, so that tells you how old we all are. And so she had this big long list: makeup and shoes and perfume and this book and a diary, and but she said that at the bottom, she said that she would give all of that up if she was able to hear. And I remember the first time she told me that, I felt quite emotional about that, and that she'd sort of opened up in that way, and that it had meant so much to her that she even sort of asked Santa if he could make her able to hear again. And that might be something that you've all sort of felt, maybe not writing a letter to Santa, but there might have been times where you feel that you would give up everything if you could have your hearing back to normal, or back to being able to hear much better than you can now. So I think that it's the sort of thing that lots of people with hearing impairments will go through at some point in their life, and it's sort of the emotions that can sort of bring up, and how you deal with that. So how do you feel about your hearing loss? We just put together, I asked lots of students when we were creating this presentation to sort of help me to come up with ways that they might describe how they feel about their hearing loss. Some of them are positive, some of them maybe not so positive. So I'll just sort of go through them. So for some people, it bothers them a lot, but on the flip side, there's lots of people who it doesn't bother them at all. And again, there's no point in your life where it's the right time to say, well, it doesn't bother me anymore. Maybe it's something that will always bother you. Maybe it's something that bothered you in the past, but you've sort of come to terms with it, and now it's fine. You sort of accepted that. There might be times when you wish that you had normal hearing. And there's such a wide range of hearing loss that it can start from mild going right through to profound. So people wanting to have normal hearing, I think that's quite understandable. Lots of people feel very comfortable with their hearing loss, particularly if there's other family members who have got hearing losses too. But obviously, if you're the only person in your family, there might come times when you wish that you weren't the only person in your family who was deaf. Maybe that makes you feel like you stand out. Maybe it makes you feel like your family don't necessarily understand what you find difficult. Some people like being different. Some people think it's kind of cool being a bit different, and some people absolutely hate anything that makes them different to their friends. You might have friends who are deaf, and maybe that makes things easier for you. Or maybe you're the only person who's deaf in your friendship group, but that's fine. And you might go through feelings of anger. Why me? Why can't my hearing be normal? Why can't I be like everybody else? There might be times when you feel very supported and that people are doing all the right things. There might be times when you don't feel supported. You might feel embarrassed. That's something that I come across lots, particularly when students go up from year 6 to year 7. They can feel embarrassed, meeting new people. And I think I mentioned it in the previous, in part 2, that when you are starting somewhere new, you should embrace your hearing aids. Let those people meet you as somebody who uses hearing aids. It makes it so much easier than if you have to reintroduce your hearing aids 2 or 3 weeks down the line when you realise that you can't manage at school without them. Maybe you're one of these people that doesn't mind wearing your hearing device. Maybe you've been a really good hearing aid user and you've worn a hearing aid since you were a baby, and you're just so used to it, and you know how much it helps you, and you know that you'd struggle without them in. And then obviously we have other students who don't like their hearing aids and will either not wear them or wear one or swap them over. One's always broken, or I've had students that ask me about invisible hearing aids, hearing aids that can't be seen. So there's people have their own struggles with their devices and what that means for them. And some people have just accepted their hearing loss, and that's fine. And if you haven't, if you're still angry about it, that's also absolutely fine. There's no how you feel about your hearing loss is very personal to you, and there's no right or wrong. Hayley, that I referred to previously, our audiological technician, again, when we were doing this, she sort of opened up and shared quite a lot of her feelings growing up as a teenager. And she said that if she really thought about it properly, she didn't accept or fully accept her hearing loss until she was in her 20s. And it was then that she sort of thought, right, okay, well, this is it, and I'm just going to get on with it, which she has. And she's travelled the world on her own. She went backpacking on her own. She's thrown herself out of an aeroplane. She's did silver service waitressing for the Australian president. You know, she's got 3 children, she's happily married. You know, she hasn't let her deafness hold her back, excuse me, in any way. So how might my hearing loss make me feel? So let's sort of think about the different feelings that you might have. And some days you might feel better about your hearing loss than you do others. It's the same as anyone. Some people have better days than others, but it's sort of thinking about the kind of things that you might be feeling and how to manage those. So if we look, we've got feeling isolated within my friends and family. So really what we're thinking about here is that it might be that you are possibly the only person in your family or in your friendship groups who has a hearing loss, and maybe people don't always interact with you in the way that you'd like. So you know, you might be feeling isolated at home, particularly at dinner time, or if you go out for a family event and everybody's talking all at once, and maybe people in your extended family that are not used to spending as much time with you, you know, don't communicate with you in the best way or in a way that you need to. If we were thinking about part 2 and communication, you know, you're sitting on a long table and it's very noisy. Maybe that person doesn't come up to you so that they're only sort of 2 meters away. You know, maybe they're shouting something to you across the table, and all of that is just a bit too much to try and communicate. So you might feel isolated in those situations. You might struggle to make friends if you're not feeling confident, or you're worried that if actually, what if I go up and start a conversation with somebody and then I can't hear what they're saying, or I have to keep asking them to repeat something, or you know, maybe they won't want to hang out with me because I've got hearing aids. I mean, your brain can let you think all sorts of things, and those things can ultimately stop you from making friends, sort of taking that risk of sort of trying to make friends. You can find it much harder to concentrate and stay focused, particularly in a noisy lesson. There's lots of content and your teacher's discussing things and you're having to listen, and because naturally it's much more tiring for you to listen through your hearing aids. So trying to concentrate and stay focused is a much harder job. And when you're being interrupted by other people or there's lots of noise, it can be hard to sort of maintain that concentration. This can lead to frustration and anger, not only with sort of concentration, just with life in general. If you find that going out and socializing is difficult, that can make you angry. If you feel like your family aren't supporting you, that can make you feel angry. If at school you've got certain teachers who don't use the strategies that they should be using, that can be very frustrating and angry. But again, it's about communicating. It's about going back to that teacher or talking to somebody at home and sharing how you feel rather than allowing it to sort of build up. And in turn, in doing that, you know, ultimately you're also building up your confidence in kind of dealing with difficult situations. You might feel nervous or anxious or worried. Um, you know, all of those feelings, particularly if there's something new happening, or if you're going somewhere and you're going to have to interact with somebody that you've never met before in an environment that you haven't been to before. You know, maybe you've got an interview for college and you don't know what to expect. You know, are you going to be able to hear that person? Do you know how to get there? What happens if something happens on the way and there's a tannoy announcement and you don't hear it? You know, there's lots of things that you can sort of worry about. But again, it's about communicating. Is there somebody that can help you with those worries? Is there somebody that can say to you, right, well, come on, let's do the journey to college so that you can see what to expect? Or, you know, if you're anxious or nervous about starting something new at school, is there somebody that you can talk to about beforehand to sort of try and alleviate those worries? Um, Attention seeking. Now, you might recognize this in yourself, maybe not, but sometimes you know, when you're struggling and you don't know what's going on and you've lost focus and you're daydreaming or you're thinking about something else, or you're bored because you can't access a lesson, you can sort of start to seek attention in other ways that's not always positive. And that might just be because you're bored, or you can't access a lesson. And again, if that is happening in lessons, then maybe that's a conversation that you need to have with that teacher so that they can try and keep you a bit more engaged with what's going on. Withdrawn, lots of people can become withdrawn. If we think back to the video that I just showed you, that young lady struggling to follow what was going on, as I said, if that was happening for her all the time, she might just decide to sort of withdraw from her friends, or if that was a family situation, withdraw from your family. So when your family come over, you sort of say your highs and then you disappear, because that's easier than sort of trying to maneuver your way through conversations or background noise. So then, all of those things can create a very negative outlook. You might start thinking, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. I'm never going to get that job that I want, and all of these things. If you're not talking to somebody, if you're not sharing those worries or those anxieties, it can be quite difficult to change that to a positive outlook. What can I do? What have I done? What are other people doing that have got maybe are in a similar situation to me? Rather than focusing on what you find difficult, like what can you do, and really sort of start to find the positives in things. Because all of that again can lead to low self-esteem and your confidence. So, I'm not good enough. I can't join in with that conversation. So, you know, I'm not good enough to be somebody's friend. I've heard all of these things from people, and it's a real sort of low self-esteem. You think, well, I'm not going to be able to get the grades that I want, so I'm not even going to bother. What job am I going to get? And then when you have low self-esteem, that affects your confidence. So again, it's all the time about being open and honest and upfront, so that all of those situations can be sort of changed. And you need other people to change their practice sometimes, how they're interacting. So again, you need to make sure that you're talking about these things. Where do you fit in? I know that this can be a bit of a struggle, and again, this is a conversation that I've had with Hayley. Hayley is from a hearing family, so she's the only person who has a hearing impairment within her family. And I think sometimes she said she's sort of struggled with her identity. Am I part of the hearing world? Am I part of the deaf world? Does it really matter? There is a deaf community out there, and some people choose to spend more time within that community, particularly if you're a BSL user. If you use British Sign Language, you might find that if you immerse yourself in the deaf community, you'll find more people that you can communicate with. But also, you're part of the hearing world. If you've got the type of hearing loss where you can hear quite a lot and there's certain bits that you can't, do you fit into the deaf community? Do you fit into the hearing community? Do you even have to choose? That can be a bit of a struggle sometimes. And obviously the rejecting equipment, I think I've lost count of the amount of students that I've had that at some point or another decide that they're not going to, or that not that they're not going to wear, but they don't need their hearing aids any longer, or they've broken, or they're at the clinic, or oh, I left them at home, and I get all of that. And basically it's that rejection of the equipment, because when you're struggling with your identity and hormones and everything, they're the thing that you feel makes you different, and they're something that's visual. So the best thing you can do to be like everybody else and to fit in like everybody else is to take them off, so nobody can see them, and then nobody knows that you've got a hearing impairment. And I completely understand that, but the problem with that is that then you can't hear as well as you could if you had your hearing aids in, and therefore in some ways you may risk making yourself stand out even more. So it's about sort of thinking that through. Who's benefiting from you taking your hearing aids out? it certainly isn't you, and I really don't think that anyone around you is affected either way. So my advice is always to use your devices, whatever that device may be. And school attendance, again, all of those things, frustration, anger, anxiety, being withdrawn, having a negative outlook, struggling with where you fit in, all of that eventually could impact on your school attendance. You know, we have had students in the past who just sort of stopped going to school because it's all too much. And of course, that should never happen. It should never get to a point where you feel that you can't go to school. You know, you've got a teacher of the deaf here that can help. You've got staff at school that are really concerned that you've got everything that you need to be able to succeed in the way that everybody else does. Okay, it might be a little bit harder for you, but there definitely should be things in place. So not attending school shouldn't really be an option. And if you are starting to feel any of those things, it's really, really, really important that you speak to somebody. If you feel that you can have those conversations with your parents, then fantastic. As I said, there's the Senko at school, there's often mentors, learning mentors. If you have a listening champion in your school, you can find your listening champion. Anyone that can sort of help you work your way through some of these things or help you to make some changes so that it's, a much more positive outlook. And I'm not going to sort of read through all of these, I'm just going to pick out a few, but there's lots of reasons why you might be feeling any of the things that you're feeling. And as I've said before, it could be you're the only person in your family, and maybe you feel that your family don't understand you. Therefore, you can feel isolated. You might be angry about having to sort of use a listening device and you've got no control over that you would struggle too much without it, so you sort of feel forced to wear it. Communication might be difficult. Your confidence might not be at the point where you are able to tell people what you need in terms of sort of communication, so that can sort of have an impact and make you feel some of the ways that you were feeling. um, Bullying is a very difficult one. With bullying, it does happen, but often it can be misinterpreted as well. So often when I have students who say, oh, I'm being bullied, obviously that is always taken very seriously, and that's something that I would always discuss with the school. But what happens is when we start to unpick that and we find out what that bullying is, sometimes it could be something as simple as somebody asking you, what are those, talking about your hearing aids. And now to somebody who's feeling sensitive about that, you automatically assume that that person's bullying you, when actually they may just be asking you a question. So when we're thinking about bullying, we have to be very careful of how we're interpreting interactions or what we might find to be bullying. And if, obviously, if it were to be bullying, that would be dealt with. But if it isn't, again, it's a real good opportunity to look at other people's interactions and how that can make you feel. And that can come from your friends as well. Like, as I said, if you're not open with your friends about what you need, then they're not going to understand your needs. And so again, it's about communication, confidence, and sort of sharing. Obviously, in lessons you can feel very lost, and as I said, again, it's about talking to the people in school that can support you and can give you help and advice on sort of how to manage those lessons that you find more difficult. People asking about your hearing devices, excuse me, I know some of you find that very difficult, and ultimately it isn't anybody else's business. But if you found yourself in that situation where someone is asking you, then maybe you just have a stock answer. So that means you just have one or two sentences that you would just say. So if someone says, oh, like, what are they, you just say, oh, they're my hearing aids, they help me to hear. That's all you have to say. You don't owe them anything else any more than that. And if someone were to keep on, you can be polite and say that actually I don't want to discuss this anymore. So don't feel pressured into talking about it if you don't feel comfortable, but always be polite. And I think ultimately I think the thing that upsets me the most is when people sort of feel the need to hide their hearing impairment. And as much as I understand all the reasons why, I think it's the biggest thing that can make you feel bad about yourself. The fact that you have to hide this when it's part of you. And the more you hide it, the more difficult you make things for yourself. Um, and so, if nothing else, I think that's a good place to start. How can I feel more confident about just wearing my hearing aids and not feeling like I've got to grow my hair to cover them, or I'm only going to wear one and leave the other one in my pocket, or I'm just going to shy away from anything to do with them? Because I think as soon as people realize that you're conscious of them, then it's something to sort of focus in on. So I think if you're out there and you're proud, then there's no one's got no one can find a reason to sort of pick on you about that. So just always try and be confident about your hearing loss. What's important for a healthy mind is all of those things: feeling loved and trusted and understood, feeling like you're valued, being included, having an interest in life and being optimistic, about what job you want, how you're going to get there, about achieving all the things that your peers are achieving. You will have to develop resilience, and that means that you're going to have to sort of cope with times that are difficult and sort of having to maybe pick yourself up sometimes and carry on and not letting things get on top of you too much. And developing independence, just about going about life and things like traveling on your own and all of those sorts of things. And all of these things, if you're good at all those things, then that's really important to keep your mind healthy and positive, having a sense of success. But you have to be positive. You have to think, yeah, I can do that. Having the capacity to learn and having some control over that. So as I said, if you're finding a lesson a struggle and it's because a teacher doesn't keep the background noise down, talk to somebody, find someone and say, Mr. Smith's lesson is really difficult because it's really noisy and I don't know what to do about it. And then maybe that's a conversation that someone else can have with Mr. Smith for you, that will help that environment. And having problem solving skills, all the time, everyday life throws something at us where you're sort of problem solving, even if it's just on a very small level. But it's about having the skills to sort of be able to do that. And all of those things are really important to keep your mind nice and healthy. But a lot of it, it has to come from you. If you're sort of sitting at home saying, well, that's all too difficult, then then it will be too difficult. But you're at home going, yes, I can do that, I can do that, there's no reason why I can't do that. Then that's going to keep your mind nice and positive and healthy and trying to find the positives. So, how can mental health be improved? How can your well-being improve? So, there's lots of things you can do, and some of it you can do for yourself, that you can help yourself, and there's other parts of it where you might rely on other people to help you, but those people are there and that's what they're there for. So to help yourself, as I've said throughout, it's about talking. So talking to family, talking to friends, talking to people at school, staff at school, if that's what you need, and being honest about how you're feeling. So rather than sitting there and getting angry or frustrated, say to someone, oh, I find it really frustrating when I can't hear because that person there is always talking, or or I can't hear the telly when everyone at home is all talking, and so sometimes I need you to be quiet. Be honest, tell people that, and 9 times out of 10 people will say, oh, sorry, I didn't realize, and they'll make things better. Is to understand your hearing loss, which is part of what this whole my understanding of deafness course is about. It's about really understanding your hearing loss and what that means for you, and being open about having a hearing loss. I'm not asking you to run around and scream and shout it, but if you meet someone and you're struggling to follow what they're saying, then you just say, oh, sorry, I'm a hearing aid user, do you mind facing me, or can you turn around, or do you mind if we go somewhere a bit quieter to talk, whatever that might be. But it's just about being open. And I think you'll be sort of pleasantly surprised 9 times out of 10 with the reactions that you get from other people. Um, Also, it's about understanding and accepting the importance of your listening devices, whatever that might be: hearing aids, cochlear implants, bone conduction aids. They are given to you for a reason, and that reason is to help you to access speech in different environments. And it's really important. So to be able to be a good communicator, to be able to learn things, we have to understand speech, and to develop our own speech, we have to be able to hear speech. So these devices are vitally important, which is why I can't stress enough about you wearing them all the time, as just as part of you. Speak out. If something's not right, say it. Be a self advocate. you know you're the person who knows what you need, what's not working. So it's up to you to sort of share that with others, um, and to sort of accept and feel okay about yourself. So I know it's hard, and you think, right, well, you know, why me sometimes? Why have I been sort of given a hearing impairment? But it's about going, okay, well, I have, and now what can I do to sort of to get on with it, and to be successful and do all the things that I want to do? Because a hearing impairment should not hold you back, should not be a reason for you not achieving your goals. And if you do need help from other people, who is there to help you? Well, you can help you, and we've just sort of talked about that. Family and friends. So when you're open and honest about situations, your family and friends can help you. The teachers of the deaf, we are here. We might not be in your school all the time, but we're always here if there's an issue. Your Senko can always get in touch if you wanted to talk to us about something. We will always sort of come in and have a chat. You've got deaf role models. So Hayley, our technician, she's a great person to talk to because she's been there and done it. She knows all the tricks, so she's a really good person. And she can also give you advice about the sorts of things that you might want to do if you are struggling or you're finding certain situations difficult. If your school has got a listening champion, so that's someone who's come and done some extra training around deaf awareness with our service, or maybe a key worker in school, they're a great person to go and talk to. There'll also be lots of other staff within your school who've attended deaf awareness training with us, and they're always there to talk to. And other students, if you do happen to have other students in your school that have got a hearing impairment, maybe a little catch up with them from time to time, see how they're feeling. Maybe you can help them. I've got two students in one of my secondary schools, and one of them was new and he was struggling to wear his hearing aids. So my other student there, he said, well, he can meet up with me and we can have a chat, and that's worked really, really well. So I was really proud of him, actually, because also that's a really good way of showing about how to be positive about your hearing loss. There are also organisations there to support you. So SENDsuccess, which is who the Teachers of the Deaf work for. We've got our audiological technician, Hayley, so she can help you with equipment and all the sorts of things that you might need to listen to your computer, listen to your iPad, listen to your music. So she's a really good person to chat to about the technology. There's the National Deaf Children's Society, or the NDCS. Their website is fantastic. They've got lots of stuff on there. There's advice about starting in further education. There's advice about work experience, finding a job. They have weekends away. They have all sorts of things on there, really good resources. So it's a really good place to sort of go and have a look. And Remark, they're an organisation which sort of work around sports. So they do a lot of things. They get together and have sports days. There's the British Association for the Deaf and the Royal Association for the Deaf. Again, really useful organisations. They can help you give you advice about equipment that you might need for home, fire alarms, alarm clocks, all the sorts of things, again, to sort of help with your independence. So really go and have a check out on their websites and see what sorts of things are on there. And also, just as I've said on all the others, just a takeaway point. Just have a think about one thing that you might have taken away from the session today. Be it that, maybe you need to talk more. Maybe you need to be more open with your friends about interactions and what you find difficult. And there will be a part 4, so do look out for that. And thanks for joining me today for this presentation. Thank you.